Hello and welcome to The Big Fight. The situation in Jammu and Kashmir is one of those situations that seems to be going through an up and down cycle. There are times when it looks as if everything is under control and peace is returned and there is normalcy. And then suddenly things will happen which makes it clear that underneath the surface, it's not quite what it seems. And then there are flashpoints, you have Handwara, you have incidents like that, and then suddenly you start to get concerned about just how bad the situation is. And perhaps this is an issue that we need to continue to give attention to, because some sort of a long-lasting solution or a way of resolving the issues or the problems, so at least reducing them to acceptable levels, is something that we should all be working towards and trying to aim. So over the next hour or so, we've assembled some of the top experts in Kashmir and on Kashmir, and to try and actually find an answer to two specific issues that I think we need to turn our attention to, and which have both been highlighted to some extent by the events of recent months. Number one, what seems to be an increasing radicalization in parts of Kashmir. There used to be a certain Kashmiriyat, a certain syncretic culture, which has historically always been there in the Kashmir Valley, but increasingly the evidence of radicalization in certain parts, you can call it Wahhabi influence, you can call it Salafist influence, but that is one set of issues that needs to be looked at. And the second, of course, is this entire question of whether you should be having the army or other elements of the security forces living in close proximity with civilians. In the face of them, should you have had a bunker in Handwara in the first place? And if not, what can be done to ensure both security is taken care of and at the same time the rights of civilians are looked after? So a lot of issues to be looked at in Kashmir, but these two in particular are the ones that we're going to be focusing on over the next 1 hour. And to join us, our panel, Junaid Mattu is joining us from Srinagar, spokesperson of the NC. Professor Hamida Naeem is also with us from there, chairperson of the Kashmir Center for Social and Development Studies. We do have Radha Kumar with us, who's a historian and interlocutor for Jammu and Kashmir, had come up with some of the possible suggestions some time back. Standing next to her, Rahul Pandita, well-known journalist, strong views on what should be done there. Suhas Chakma is with us as well, director for Asians of the Asian Center for Human Rights. We have with us Mr. Ian Ram Mohan, former DG BSF, also looked at the CRPF, a whole range of actually paramilitary forces. I can't think of too many you haven't been associated with. So great to have your expertise. Major General G.D. Bakshi, it's always a pleasure to have you with us, one of our top defense analysts. We have Sambit Patra with us as well, spokesperson of the BJP, and Tom Vadakan representing the Congress Party. So a range of voices, as I said. All right, let me start off very quickly by first getting everyone's very brief sense of what actually is happening in the Kashmir Valley, because I sometimes find our discussions and debates on Jammu and Kashmir are slightly dominated by noise. And I've said this in the past: if you could convert anti-national separatist elements in Kashmir to loyal patriotic people by shouting at them, we'd all do a lot more of it. But I think, and I fear, that the solutions perhaps a little bit more complex than that, and we need to find what the right answers are. So Junaid, why don't I start with you, get a perspective right there from Srinagar. What we are seeing in the valley right now, is it more or less worrying than what has always been there? We did see 2008 there was a flare-up, 2009 there was a flare-up, 2010 obviously was ghastly, everything that happened. Is it worse or better than that? And what I started by saying, rising levels of radicalization, would you agree with that?
Vikram, as you said in your intro, there are these flashpoints, there is this relative period of relative peace, and then as soon as there is a provocation, there's an instigation or an incident like we saw in the case of Handwara and Kupwara, you never know what that can spiral into. You don't know where that stops. In the case of Handwara and Kupwara, it stopped with the killing of the 5th civilian. Now the state government has recently declared to the Election Commission that the situation is not conducive in the state to hold elections to one of the vacated seats in South Kashmir. But I think that is political. I think the situation is not, we have seen worse, let us put it in that way. As far as radicalization is concerned, I wouldn't completely disagree. Radicalization is a social phenomenon that we see in conflict zones, and that is where we should ask ourselves, should we continue with an operative management of the Kashmir issue, or should we look at a political resolution of the issue so that we somehow encourage an atmosphere of normalcy and liberalism in the valley, unless the conflict goes away, unless there is a sense of resolution and redressal, things like radicalization, phenomena like radicalization will always be there.
Okay, don't just treat it as a law and order problem, is what I think you're trying to say, and which often comes up when you're having discussions around Jammu and Kashmir. Professor Hamida Naeem, so there's a law and order and the management of that part of it, which of course is something that I do want to, and we've got some of the experts who can say how that can perhaps be managed a little better. But are you seeing a societal change taking place in Jammu and Kashmir, as some people are pointing to?
You have to come out of this law and order discourse and come to a people's discourse. And when you look at it from the people's perspective, everything is abnormal in Kashmir. Once you keep the highest military concentration in Kashmir, what could be the reaction from the public? It would lead to radicalization. I'm not sure how far radicalization has taken place, but it could be a logical outcome out of the abnormal and exceptional situation which has been created by this unprecedented concentration of army in Kashmir. You have actually tried to securitize Kashmir. You have never tried, I mean the state has never tried to find a political resolution to the Kashmir issue. Instead, you have turned the dispute into a conflict of multiple stakeholders. And once you actually are opening a Pandora's box, you make everyone a stakeholder in a simple dispute, then it is logical that it could lead to that kind of radicalization. It is not therefore people who are responsible for any radicalization. It is the state which led us this situation to come up.
All right.
And therefore, the first thing has to be that you have to remove arm from the, first of all, from the civilian areas, because they are controlling the life and death of people. And time and again, we have seen a pattern in which army actually does take lives of people on the slightest pretext.
All right, Major General Bakshi, any time when you're having a large concentration of armed forces in a small area, cheek by jowl with civilians, you have the potential for conflict and the potential for radicalization. Would you agree with that?
Look, I think it's a very simplistic logic to say that the sole raison d'etre for the problem in Jammu and Kashmir is the presence and concentration of the army. It is just demonizing the army. I hope you understand that Kashmir is disputed territory between China and India, India and Pakistan. You take the army away, you are in fact ceding it to these other inimical states to just walk in. So I'm sure that's not a solution really. You know, the fact of the matter is, let's look for the causative. I think you are very right. Look for the causative factors. You know, I'll tell you something surprising. You have the biggest youth bulge in the whole world. You not only have problems taking place in Kashmir, you have the Jat agitation, you have the Patel Patidar agitation, you have the unrest on the campuses. Why? 483 million Indians need jobs. They have finished their educational cycles. They are now entering the job market. Your job creation,
nothing to do with the army, nothing specifically to do with Kashmir. You are saying that this is part of what you're going to see.
So the point that I'm trying to make is, it will have different regional manifestations. In Jammu and Kashmir, it will manifest itself in heightened radicalization, in greater drift towards the intifada phase, now that the terrorists per se have been largely checked.
Okay, Professor Haim, before I come to the others, just to understand what actually you were arguing for and what Major General Bakshi said, he's saying correctly that you can't obviously take the army completely out of Jammu and Kashmir, because it is at the end of the day disputed territory. China's there, Pakistan's there. So what exactly are you arguing for? That the army should be removed away from civilian areas? Is that what you're saying, or are you saying the army should be gone completely?
What I am trying to say is that ever since for the last so many years, decades, Government of India has not taken resolute steps to address the issue. And if you won't address the issue, you are actually securitizing Kashmir, that we need army in Kashmir in order to keep away China and Pakistan. That is ridiculous. On the one hand, he is saying that the levels of militancy have come down. Whatever he is saying is a different, dominant, power-thirsty discourse. It is not the people's discourse. And I'm sorry to say, you need not get army generals to actually discuss the resolution of the issue. They are simply an agency of the government. It is the political class which has to take decisions. Army has not to dictate terms, whatever suits it. That is not that, because then there is a vested interest which has developed over the years in the security agencies also in Kashmir. What kind of role have security agencies in the civilian space? Tell me for God's sake. Even in Handwara case, army has said that we have been actually
General Bakshi is trying to say something to you.
Unnecessarily dragged into it.
Good, thank you. What I am trying to tell you is we are not there for tourism, right? We were there because in my time, 80,000 Kalashnikov rifles, 3,000 machine guns, 1,500 rocket launchers, 68,000 grenades, millions of rounds of ammunition we have recovered. How much more has been pumped in? I do hope you understand that with 80,000 Kalashnikovs, you can raise an army corps. Pakistan has pumped it in. Kalashnikovs do not grow, madam, on the apple orchards of Jammu and Kashmir. They have been sent in to destabilize and create a serious situation where the level of violence had gone completely beyond the police and the paramilitary forces. We were sent. We do not go there for tourism.
Okay. Let me just get you in, Mr. Rahman. Yes, there was a very, very tough time, and he's right. In 92, 93, you were there, you experienced it. I've been with you there at those times. It was actually like a war zone. Now, you needed a certain amount of military presence to maintain India's hold in the Kashmir Valley. Today, is there a possibility for doing things slightly differently? I mean, obviously, you do have to have the army in large parts. You have to have the army there in Jammu and Kashmir. You know, it is a border area at the end of the day, just as you have to have the army in the northeast or Rajasthan or Gujarat or any other places. Is there an argument in your view to be made that at least when it comes to civilian facing roles, you should have perhaps a better trained, better equipped Jammu and Kashmir police force or paramilitary forces raised from within the valley, which should be facing the civilians to a lot more, so that the army and any other paramilitary forces that are there should be more looking at purely counter-terrorism, counter-insurgency and border security aspects?
I think I agree with what you're saying. The army has to be in Kashmir, you cannot avoid it. Not for policing the state. The army has to be there because they have to guard the borders, both in the west as well as in the north and the east. Now the problem is that when the army is in these forward areas, they have to have stations down below which will pass through the civilian areas, and their convoys will pass through the civilian areas. But I personally feel, because I'm a policeman and I worked throughout the northeast and I worked in Kashmir. When I went to Kashmir in 93, the situation was extremely bad. There was only firing and nothing else. When you have to handle a situation like this, it is advisable not to put the army facing the civilians, if it is possible. And it is possible if you have well-trained police forces and very good leadership. One of the most important things in this country as far as leadership is concerned is that the public must have confidence that this leader is not taking sides. He is totally neutral. And he is infecting his own people with that neutralism. Once that is established, the public will have confidence in that force.
Okay.
It's very difficult for the army to understand this, because they are a force to defend the nation.
And it's not their job to be actually doing crowd management and dealing with stone pelters. It is not the job. It should never have been the job of the army to be doing
The
any of
army, Vikram, does not want to be involved in such a task.
And I think that's what the army's been saying the last couple of weeks.
We have been completely taken out of Srinagar because we insisted that we should be. We don't want
but
to
even the Handwara issue really came down to a bunker in the center of Handwara. It's now been demolished, but maybe it could have been.
There is more to Handwara than meets the eye.
So obviously it is a debatable issue, but rather, part of what you and the other interlocutors were talking about was also part of this. And I have failed to understand why over all these years we have not been able to really invest in building up 10, 20, 30, 40, 60 battalions of well-trained, well-equipped Jammu and Kashmir police forces trained in crowd control with the sort of equipment that you would see in a similar flashpoint in the west or somewhere. If you had that happening, maybe you wouldn't be having firings, you wouldn't be having 100 deaths like you did in 2010 or even 5 deaths as you've seen in the last month.
I think that point, Vikram, comes to a point that General Bakshi made earlier. Whether it's Haryana, whether it's other parts of the country, most recently Bengaluru, we see our public gathering, protesting, burning buses, looting buildings, destroying public property and assets. I would only argue that it's very important to be seen as having a even-handed, consistent policy across the country on that issue. You
But
cannot
there is a
say,
difference.
you
It's
cannot
not
be
the crowds in
selective.
Bangalore or others are not shouting anti-Indian slogans or saying India get out of here. That's not. So there is a difference at the end. Of
Well, actually, quite
they're
honestly,
they're
I
not
would
throwing
say
stones at a time when terrorists are. There's an encounter taking place between terrorists and the army, and they're throwing stones at the army. So
we'll come to that
the two
phenomenon.
things are different.
We'll come to that phenomenon. But your first point about shouting slogans, I think the destruction of public assets is much worse than shouting slogans. I'm an old-fashioned person. I believe that sticks and stones will break my bones and words will not. And I would urge that the priorities be seen correctly in this audience as well as in our country. Okay. When it comes to radicalization, look, this is a global phenomenon. I think neither is Hamida right in saying that it's a response to military presence, nor would we be right to see it in isolation. This is happening amongst youth in all over the world today. It's not preventable in Birmingham, just as it's not being prevented here, or Brussels, or London, or New York, or Washington, or Chechnya, or Moscow, or Beijing, or Xinjiang. It's a problem that has to be addressed with collective wisdom.
What was the recommendation that you as the interlocutors made on this specific point? And has it been acted upon?
One, on the army, we made 2 points. First, that there's very little knowledge that the army today is bound by the Supreme Court regulations on how they can operate even in counter-terrorism situations. And those are actually quite stringent regulations for the protection of human rights. I believe that it's very important for the army to also go more public on this, that you are working under a completely changed rubric of operational behavior.
The perception in large parts of the Kashmir Valley is that the army and the other armed forces, the security forces, have a complete license to do whatever they want under AFSPA. That's
no, so that is not correct. That has been altered by the Supreme Court regulations. Okay. Second point, on the policing point, is that because of 20 years of insurgency and conflict, which was much reduced from the 2005-06 onwards, the police tended to be more intelligence gathering. Now they were put into, from 2008-09, the civilian tasks have been undertaken by JK police, not by army, not by CRPF.
But a poorly trained and equipped JK police, I might add.
And most important is the equipment problem. They do not have water cannons. They do not have ways of keeping
pepper
a
gas,
distance.
No, there are lots of technology that exists right now.
Even a distance between armed police and civilian, they have no way of keeping this. And the final is that you have a vacuum at the political level.
Right.
When you talk about villagers and so on going and pelting stones, this is a slightly new phenomenon. Yep. It has not been the case earlier.
Okay, Rahul, let me get you in before I come to Ashok.
I'll take you back to 1989-90. The situation in Kashmir in 1989 in the early 90s was explosive. There was an absolute collapse of civil and police administration. When Rubaiya Saeed kidnapping happened, when the government of India was asked to bend, it crawled. So obviously there was a lot of weakness in the system. But after 1990, the army took over and broke the back of militancy from 90s onwards, and it has done a fantastic job. But I think we have come to a stage now for many, many years, at least 5-6 years, when this fight of fighting terrorism should go to J&K police. The J&K police today is a professional police. It is extremely well trained. They've done some fantastic operations, intelligence-based operations. Nowhere, as Mr. Ramon would tell you, and that is the problem.
Fighting terrorism should be given to them, or dealing with internal security,
with
law and order, crowd control.
Both inside Valley,
are
they
equipped to take
absolutely, absolutely.
Better for intelligence, less good for civilian.
They have done so many operations that are fantastic operations, anti-terrorism operations when militants are holed up in buildings. As Radha said, they have excellent intelligence inputs. They have moles within Lashkar, Jaish-e-Mohammed. They get intelligence on ground. The army must be getting it too, but not as much as J&K police.
Okay. Can I just get you in on this? If you talk to a group of people in the Kashmir Valley, they'll say that there is a license to kill that has been given to the security force, as you hear in large parts of the northeast as well. Is that really the case?
No, I think the situation in Kashmir has improved, but I think we ought to realize that taking away the army, replacing with the police is not the solution. We have the worst situation in Manipur, where Manipur police commandos kill more than the security forces, the central forces. I think what we have to realize is that the situation compared to the 1990s has dramatically improved, and now we have to build upon it. If you cannot build upon if the security forces believe that they are beyond the reach of the law. That's happening in Kashmir, that's happening in Northeast, that happens even in Delhi. Now, if you look at the recent uprising, and if you look at the uprising in 2011, why did the uprising take place? Uprising took place against a series of human rights violations. Now, if the government had taken immediate steps in conformity with the law to ensure that nobody is treated above the law, and if you assuage this sentiment, then obviously you build the solidarity with the people.
But
and
in this case, if you look at this particular case, there are differences in many cases. Yes, in 2010 there was a fake encounter charges that were there. In 2009 there was an attack on 2 women. But in this particular case, it was, in a sense, or at least what seems to have come out, full investigation needs to be done. It was probably a fake report or a fake video which sparked the whole thing off. And as he said, there's some sort of a mystery around it, because it's not necessarily Handwara is not one of the places which is normally, that parts have not really been particularly prone to violence of this nature.
But then it's the responsibility. No, it's the responsibility of
Handwara is more. Actually, the violence in Handwara has more been in the hills and other places. This is the place from where the militants infiltrate. But in the city of Handwara, you've not quite had crowd.
No, I think we have to realize that if there is a misreporting, it can even take place as close to Delhi as in Dadri. Yeah. You know, if you do the investigation, you will find out that there was no beef. No, that's not the issue. The issue is, I think we have to build a society based on the rule of law, and that's not happening.
You know, I'd just like to inject a note of realism. Please see the problem on the ground. See the anatomy of the Handwara incident. They claim that a girl was molested. The girl herself says nothing like this. It is these boys who misbehaved with me. You see, a lynch mob is assembled, stoning of an isolated bunker starts, then that bunker is surrounded and set on fire. What orders do you want me to give to my troops? You should quietly get burnt. Is that the order? Can you expect a commander to give this order to his troops? He is a human being. He has got the right to private self-defense. If the lady very rightly said, sticks and stones have been used.
Yeah.
And with stones you are going to burn a set of boys down in their bunker. So what do you expect them to do?
No, I think
the law has to be enforced. Nobody can take the law into his own hands. No. Let's also not, you know, a reflex reaction that the chief minister barges into the RM's office and says, sack these guys, arrest these guys. What orders do you want me to give to my boys next time? Look, if a mob surrounds you, hits you with stone, you are bleeding through your head, through your arm, your nose, and now they want to put you on fire, please stand quietly, bow your head and take it.
No, I think
take it.